So down here we have layers. You can see I have a layer called greens, balloons, ground, and background. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the background, remove the ground, remove the balloons. Okay, now this is the layer that's green. This little eye here indicates a layer that's visible. You can see everything else is not visible. That's visible, not visible. Now the background is transparent, and on this layer, this is basically everything that's green. Now the people on the balloons are not green, but what we're going to do is we're going to change the green colors. We're going to focus on the green colors, and everything else is going to not matter. We're going to get rid of the people, we're going to get rid of the bike, and I'll show you how I did that. And you can see up here there's already some transparency there because I removed it. And so that's an important thing. I usually take things that matter, like the balloons, the ground, the background. I took those and I separated them. You can see this blue line here. That blue line is basically the border of the layer. So it shows you basically the selected layer. Like this is the ground layer, so it shows you that from this point this is the ground layer. Now what if we click on balloons? Click on balloons, you can see that there's a box around the balloons. We're going to go ahead and use the brush tool. Just click on it. Up here shows the different, you click on that, it shows you the different hardness. Now I keep the hardness down to 0. That means that you're going to have soft edges. If you put it all the way up here, it's going to be a really hard edge, and we'll go over that later. Now the diameter, you can see right now that's a pretty small diameter there, but if you zoom in, it's bigger. Obviously you can just drag it down, you have a much smaller point. Right now we're going to be doing a much larger selection tool because we're going to be working with a larger area. So I just want to show you this. I've got the ground layer, which is down here, so we're going to click on the ground layer. Now watch what we're going to do. We know that the ground layer is separated from all the other layers. We're going to change the color of the ground to the specified color that we want, and the contrast that we want, and the different hues that we want, because we're going to make the ground bring a certain feeling to the image, and we're also going to change the greens. We're going to change every single element of the image specifically to what we want, and that's how we're going to get an overall feel. That's how we're going to present our work to our client, the way that we imagine it. Because I mean, you can just photograph an image and give it to a client and say, here's your image, but you want to really have a vision when you start to shoot. Unless your work doesn't really require you to have a vision, but in my opinion, you should have a vision. So let's go ahead and get to some editing here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is you can see down here we've already selected the ground layer, and we can see the blue line, so we know that we are working with the ground layer. Now up here we're going to go to Image and Adjustment. We're going to go to Levels. Watch what Levels does. It's going to bring up a dialog, and basically this is a real simple dialog here. Now this middle dot is kind of like shifting everything over. You can see if I shift it, look what happens to the ground layer. I'm going to do some really fast editing. I'm on the ground layer. Turn it down just a little bit. Okay, I'm on the ground layer. I've already changed the levels. Now I'm like, okay, what else can I do? Maybe I can change the contrast, because if you look here, I want to make the white and the black pop a little bit more. I'm still selected on the ground layer. I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustment, and Brightness and Contrast, wherever that is. There it is. It brings up this dialog. One is the brightness, which I'll just show you can make it brighter or darker. I'll go ahead and cancel that, do it again. Okay, so we're going to take this contrast, and it doesn't have to be a lot. you make some changes, and you can see it doesn't really make much of a difference. I kind of like that. Okay, I kind of like that. So that was 0.25 contrast that I added. And we're gonna okay that, which is this one right here. This is your mask tool. The mask tool allows you to basically remove portions of the layer to reveal the bottom layer. And I'll show you that. I'll just click on mask. It brings up this little white box. Just click once on the little white box, make sure it's selected. Now we already have this brush tool. Now click on our colors. The color there, you want it to be black. Just make sure it's all the way black. Hit OK. Now black is going to reveal the color underneath it. So if I started to draw on it, you can see it's revealing the color underneath. And if I select my color to white, select white now, and I can draw back in the same spot, and it's going to basically replace what I just did. And it's painting back what I took away. So I gotta figure out, okay, how can I balance these two? I'm actually going to select the green layer, put a mask on it as well. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to zoom in using this bar here. It's a really easy way to zoom in. And I'm going to just look in this general area. I'm on the greens layer. Now I'm going to put my color back to white. Put the color back to black. Okay, so you can see that there. If I just click once, it starts to make that green layer translucent. And the bigger the brush, the more around the image is going to be translucent. So I'm pretty much making this green layer translucent along the bottom ends here by the motorcycle. You can see that line that just showed up because I need to actually smoothen the ground layer in that same spot, which is basically like there. Okay, so now I've smoothened out that area. Do it to both sides. Now there's a thing up here called opacity and flow. Right now my flow is at 100%, but let's change the flow to something like 50%. Okay, now let's change the color back to white because we want to put more of that color back. I took some away, we want to put it back. So now when I click, look at that. It's only giving me a little bit. And I'm telling you right now, this is the basics. This is the basics of editing here, because you're basically removing a lot of color in one area and you're putting color back in another area. Now let's go ahead and put our background layer back on there. Okay, now I just did that. And already it's not too bad. And what you have to do is start to see that line there. Now that's because the motorcycle has its own, it's going to have its own layer, its own colors. We're not going to really worry about that. What we're focusing on right now is that I got all this ground the way that I wanted it. And the ground is nice. And also the transition between the ground and this green up here is also a pretty nice transition. Granted that this line in the middle is not going to be there by the end of this. This is only temporary. So what we can do, around the ground level, let's go ahead and click on the far left square. And actually we're going to get this, you know what, let's actually go on the mask layer. Let's get rid of, yeah, And so you can see we can get rid of this by simply blending and revealing the layer underneath. And I just basically drew black on the mask part of the ground layer, so I'm revealing more between the ground layer, just so that it looks smooth. It's like being a painter. That's why I like Photoshop. It's like you're painting things. Long click on it. We're going to go back to Polygon Lasso. Now let's say we want to just get the blue balloon by itself, or we want to just get the yellow balloon by itself. We're going to make a general. Let me zoom in a little bit. We're going to get a general outline, just clicking around this yellow balloon, making it obvious that that's what we want. Now once you bring the loop around to connect with the other point, you'll see a circle appear. Once that circle appears, you can click and you can see it shows that this is the selected area. Now if you're on the balloons layer, okay, that's the layer we're going to be copying from. Just hit Control C. Just regular Control C. Now we're going to go to our new layer. We're going to hit Control V to paste it. You know those shortcuts already. And then, if we get rid of every other layer, including the background layer, you can see that this is the balloon layer that we have. Excuse me. Now, it may be easy. Let's go ahead and zoom in. And I like to use this tool here on the far right, because with this tool, it's easy to zoom in that way. So we're going to go ahead and make our balloons visible. Now we're going to go to Image and Adjustments. If you notice, we always go to Image and Adjustments. That changes the individual portion of the layer that you have selected. So I've selected this balloon layer, and that's what we're going to change. So we're going to actually change the, let's change the hue and saturation. Let's move that over a little bit. And what we're going to do here, let's try to bump the saturation up. Oh wow, okay, you can see it changes that a lot. Now, this isn't a gallery piece. I want to over-exaggerate these colors, because for someone to clearly understand how beautiful it was there, they would have had to have been there. So I want to make it as vivid as my mind portrayed it, or I want to make it as vivid as I think my client would want it portrayed. So I'm just giving it +10. Now the hue, I can make that balloon look like an orange balloon. I can make it look like, but I like yellow. So we're going to make sure it's a really nice yellow. And we're actually going to put it back at 0 just because, and we're going to hit enter. So now we have that balloon. Okay. Now to ensure we're going to get a really good yellow balloon by itself, we are on the same layer. We're going to double click. We're going to call this one yellow balloon. We're going to hit enter. So now we have a yellow balloon layer, and we have this balloon layer. The only layer that's visible is our yellow balloon layer, and it shows you that this blue rectangle or the blue square indicates that your layer is visible. And I went there by going to View and going to Show and Layer Edges. Now without layer edges, you're not going to be able to, it's going to be harder to tell what layer is selected. So we're going to go ahead and get a new mask, and I've already showed you how to do that, so I'm not going to illustrate that. We're going to go over to our tools. We're going to select the brush. I use the brush probably 80–90% of the time. We're going to change the size to something more suitable for this view. Now, like I said before, the larger the brush, the more it can fade. And actually, we want the hardness all the way down here, because watch this. We're on the yellow layer. We're on the mask portion. Now watch what happens when I draw black. It's making it transparent. And it's making it transparent because that's what black does on a mask layer. Black shows what's beneath it. Now beneath it is just the canvas, so it's going to be transparent. I'm going to actually turn my flow up to 100%. so it's going to flow a lot faster. Now you can kind of see that there's some feathering here, so this is the painting thing. You want to be careful, and you want to basically paint pretty close to the edge, but you want to leave some room. And this is just a general. We want to generally paint around the outside of this yellow balloon, because that's going to better separate these colors here. I mean, not the colors, it's going to better separate the layers. We want to basically have a layer with this balloon, and we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll get back to you. Okay, this is about the right effect that we want here. We're very close around the edges of the balloon. You can see that the background is completely transparent, and you can kind of see some of these hues of blue for the other balloon. That's okay, because we're blending. So we're going to be blending with transparency the other thing. Now let's go ahead and show the other balloons just by clicking on the layer. Now you can see the nice yellow balloon and the blue balloons. And okay, so now we want to work with the blue balloons. So we're going to click on the blue balloons layer, and I want to make these balloons a little bit darker. So we're going to go adjustments again. We're going to go down to exposure. Now this is kind of like in your camera. We're going to move that to the side a little bit. We're going to do exposure by minus like, let's go minus 0.13. Okay, made it a little bit darker. We're going to go OK. Now we're going to go to adjustments. We're going to go, let's go color balance. Color balance is cool because it allows you to select different cyan colors, magenta colors, yellow colors, blue, green, and reds. Now we have blues here, so you can see if I move it more to the blue side, it's going to add more blue to it. You can see it added all that blue there. We don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and set that back to 0. And but what we're going to do is we're going to go color balance. We're going to find the right hue of blue that I want, so I'm going to add just a little bit more blue to it to make that blue a little more beautiful. If I add some magentas and make it more purple, I can add greens to it, make it a little bit brighter. Okay, I like that. We're going to go up to adjustments again, and we're going to add a contrast to see if we can bring out the color a lot more. Okay, not necessarily. Go ahead and cancel. So I'm going to say, okay, this is fine for now. Okay, now you're going to really get to see your results when you zoom out. And I don't even like to look at my images at 100%. I like to look at them at like 7%, 12%, 15%, because in that way I get to see everything. Like I can see now the yellows pop very beautifully. The blues have a really nice color to them. The motorcycle will have its own nice color. In all these different areas, I'm going to darken those areas, make them beautiful. These areas up here are white. Guess what? I'm going to separate those to their own layer. You know how to do that. You're going to use the marquee tool. You're going to separate them, make sure the layer that you're selecting from or the layer that you're copying from is selected. You're going to get a new layer. You're going to name that layer, and you're going to simply paste it. Once you paste it, I recommend editing things by themselves, or you can actually edit things like, you can edit things with everything still in the view. That way you can get an idea in general terms of what kind of impact it's going to make on the image. But I think this is going to be a good gallery piece. It represents in motion. I was basically at a hotel, the Lewis Grand. This was the day that Sheena came and had surprised me, and it was just an awesome day. And this image is all about chase. Now, I chased this shot. I seen this motorcycle coming. I saw the balloons. I had literally seconds to get my camera ready. Now, how did I get this image? Well, I had my camera in aperture priority mode. I knew that the time of day, and I knew that the amount of light I had, I was going to let the camera choose the best shutter speed for me. and I knew that I wanted to get the background blurred, so I basically just used aperture priority, and I think I was at something like f5.6 to like f8, and I knew that that would give me a fast enough shutter speed, and I knew that it would give me a nice beautiful blur in the background. And because of that knowledge, I was able to do that, and this is a shot that I got. And some people might say, well, it's blurry, you know, it's the image is not in focus. And then you say, no, wait a second now, it's in focus. You can see my subject is clearly in focus because there's a contrast between the subject and the background. Now the background is blurry. That's a signature trait of mine. I like to have streaks in the background with the subject here very clear. And also you can get a good feel for what your image is going to look like over here in this navigational plane. So like I said, hope that helps, and I'll be showing you more videos of other shortcuts of the things as I'm working on them. So this is Phil Bailey from Phil Bailey Photography, and In-Motion Travel Guide with a Photoshop tip exclusive for you, the client. I wanted to explain something here. I'm going to use my pointer again. Now, I haven't really made many changes yet, but you can see here the balloons. Very, very nice. I want these balloons to have a really good contrast between the grass and the balloons. And it's that very reason why we separate it, because we want to be able to have those controls. Now, let's look at some problems that I'm going to run into. Okay, look at this. This guy's shirt is pretty much the same color as the bike. Now, I can just say, let's go ahead and make a layer with all the reds on one layer. And let's, okay, so if I did that, what I would run into is if I make any change to that red color to make it look good, it's going to change his shirt and the bike. So guess what? I'm going to make a layer and call it shirt. I'm going to make a layer called motorbike. I already actually have that. It's called motorbike right there. So we're going to separate his shirt from the bike. Now what I can do is I can change the hue of his shirt by going to image adjustment and by going to hue saturation. Now if I do that, I can make his shirt have a different contrast in relation to the bike to make it show. Just like her shoe is red, I can change that different, but it might work to its advantage to have it be the same color. It just depends. Now this hub here, I might want to put that on its own layer, or I might want to add a slight bit of darkness to that hub, so that way when I print this out, the contrast between the hub and the background is going to actually be perfect. Now, like I said, it's a very big amount of work you have to do. Now you can see these little spots here and there and there. Now there's spots everywhere because the negative was scanned. Now if you're shooting digital, you might not have as many spots. Or depending on how you scan, it can reduce the amount of specks you have. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the resolution here, I think this is like a 40 megapixel image, and it's like 9,000 by like 5,000 pixels or something like that. It's about that. That gives you basically 40 million pixels. So that's 40 megapixel. Okay. This guy's hair in the background is pretty good. That mirror is pretty white. I might want to make that slightly darker just so that it doesn't look like a complete white spot. I'm going to use color balance. Now, I could use hue saturation. I could desaturate his shirt. I could oversaturate the shirt. But if you use saturation too much, you get little blemishes and little effects that you don't really like. So I would rather use this color balance. I'm going to, let's see, what happens if I add more red? I can make it more red. Look at that. Now this looks significantly a little bit brighter. Okay. If I add some yellow, it doesn't really do much. I can make it purple. No, that's not good. I can take out some of the red, make it more, okay, that goes purple again. Let's see, magentas, blues, just try to give it, okay, that's pretty different. Okay, so that's pretty different, and you can see there, it definitely stands out. Now what I have to think about is, okay, looking in this small window, how does that look overall? It's pretty cool, right? But I have to think, is this red overpowering the effects of the vivid balloons? And should I knock it down just a little bit? Maybe that's good. Look at how that green pops now. Okay, now all this green, I just changed that. And this little section in here has kind of some yellows to it. But those yellows complements this balloon. And this lightness complements the lightness of the ground here. And that lightness complements this whiteness here. We're going to add contrast to here so that way this area pops. We want every single part of the image to pop, but we don't want it to overpower the subject here. I think that's really important to keep the subject good. You know, you want to keep the subject visible. You don't want anything to draw attention away from your subject. Otherwise, people are going to look at the image and be like, I don't get it. They're not going to get it. Okay? So you can see here, this patch in the middle is dark. This is going to be the darker areas, and we're going to make it darker, but we're also going to change the hue to match with all of this stuff. And then we're going to go ahead and use, guess what tool? We're going to use the brush. We're going to paint black with a very, very soft edge, and we're going to basically paint literally different areas, and that's why you got to go back and forth between brush sizes and blacks, whites, and grays. If you have a gray color on the paintbrush, it's going to be the equivalent of flow. It's going to basically reveal more or less depending on how much white or how much black you use. It's a much warmer feel. It's kind of not a surreal thing because it was a very real thing. It was a real thing, but it's enhanced to bring the warmth that I felt, because the camera has no idea of capturing the warmth that you feel, and I think that's why Photoshop is an important tool for visualization, and that's the reason why I decided to continue to use Photoshop as an extensive part of my photography, though 90% of my work I shoot is film. Think about it. You know, 50% of my work, or even 70% of my work, is post-production. It's scanning the negatives, it's photoshopping the negatives, print testing, and even for digital photographers, the Photoshop, the printing, and the testing, and all that stuff, exposure checking, that's no different than a film photographer using different films for the same shot to try to get the right feel that they want. And that's all I can say. Now, I'm just showing you the basics, but with these basics, it goes a long way, because in every single thing that you do, you're going to be using the same tools for the most part. You're going to be using brushes, you're going to be using different selection tools, and you're going to find ways that work for you. At the end of the day, an editor can spend so much time on a photo, but one thing is certain. So when you're using Photoshop, there's so many things that you can do, and it's almost endless. Like, you can literally take every pixel if you wanted to and change it, and at the end of the day, the vision of the photographer will have been realized. And this image still has a lot to go, taking out the different blemishes of the different dust spots, but you know, this compared to the original image, as you've seen where it came from when I first started the video, this is a dramatic change. I think it has a much warmer feel, and I think that people in the gallery are going to react to it, knowing the theme behind the chase of destiny. That says a lot. Get me on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. I will do my best to get these screencasts up there. Thank you guys for watching. Photography and motion travel guide with a Photoshop tip.